Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Kevin Ostreicher, host of Locked On Ravens, getting you ready for the divisional round Sunday night game between the Bills, Ravens, Highmark Stadium. Winner goes to the AFC Championship game. It is one win away from the Super Bowl. Kevin, if Baltimore is going to go into Highmark Stadium and get this win, what are the keys to victory?
I think one, being able to convert at a high level for the Ravens. This has been a team that when you look at their conversion rates, and this has been a storyline throughout the entire season for them, they're one of the best third down offenses in the league and the best red zone offense. They converted nearly 75% of their red zone opportunities when it comes down to that. So in games like this, and I expect this one to be close, probably a little more high scoring than the Pittsburgh game. And, obviously both the Ravens and Bills were able to put it to the Steelers and Broncos defenses, respectively. I just feel like red zone opportunities are going to be so huge. And that, honestly, the defensive side of the ball, too. The Ravens on the defensive side of the ball, red zone wise, they've been okay. They're 12th. And when you look at Buffalo's red zone percentage on offense, they're right behind Baltimore, the number 2. So these are two high-powered red zone offenses, and it might just come down to which team is able to tighten up inside the 20 and force the opposing offense to kick field goals. With 2 field goal kickers I know, Joe, who have had some up and downs this season. Justin Tucker, luckily for Baltimore side of things, has turned it around since the bye week, but obviously it was a very rocky stretch for him before. So if it comes down to a final kick, whichever fan base it is, I'm sure it's going to be sweating thinking about what's going to happen here because of all the volatility we've seen from both those guys this year. Secondly, the Ravens have had an issue with penalties all season. It's no secret. They've ranked in the bottom 5, bottom 2, worst in the league, and a lot of that. And obviously, it's kind of forced the Baltimore fan base to look at who's going to be reffing each game and seeing tendencies. And I know the crew coming to Buffalo, I think offense holding is the most called penalty of that crew. And it's just going to depend on execution, where the Ravens have had multiple times. We talked about stopping the run for Buffalo and Derrick Henry. The Ravens will get an 8-yard run, and then they'll be holding on an offensive lineman, and instead of 2nd and 2, you're in 1st and 20, and that just kills your drives. And the Ravens have lost multiple games this season that way. They've been better recently, but it's still not perfect. And then finally, I just think if I'm given like a key player in this game, Brandon Stephens is one that I think is going to be a huge matchup for Buffalo in terms of, we talked about guys like Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins. The Ravens have a lot of great players on that secondary, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, and obviously Kyle Hamilton. But Brandon Stephens, his weakness is he doesn't turn his head around for the ball. And if you're a receiver, especially if the Ravens do invite Josh Allen to throw that ball deep and they're able to convert on some of those deep shots, if a receiver shows late hands, obviously as a receiver, you're looking for cues to turn your head around for the ball. And if Brandon Stephens doesn't get that, they're going to let up a lot of deep completion. So I think limiting the deep passing game and forcing turnovers. This could come down to just a turnover battle. Who ends up getting more turnovers? Who ends up holding the ball last? If whichever team makes the least mistakes goes on to the AFC Championship game, that wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
Yeah, it's funny how often games are lost more than they are won, especially in the postseason. I will say this, man. You mentioned the kickers. If Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen for a date in the AFC Championship game comes down to Tyler Bass and Justin Tucker, something has gone wrong. Like, nobody wants that. That is not why a single person is turning on this game, and they're not turning it on to watch referees either. So let's keep the kickers and the refs out of this thing, because it's annoying. We want the players to decide what's going on. Kevin, it's interesting you start with red zone because I also start with red zone, and you mentioned 1 and 2, Ravens 1, Bills 2 in red zone touchdown percentage. Ravens defense is 12th. I think the Bills are 16th in red zone defense. And I think that's going to be really, really critical, particularly for the Bills on defense. And I want to go back to the last 4 matchups. The 2024 Week 4 win, the Ravens 4 for 4 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Go back to the 2022 game. The Bills win that one. Baltimore goes 2 for 4. Lamar has a red zone turnover. Go back to the 2020 playoff win. The Ravens go 0 for 3 in the red zone. There's a big red zone turnover, the Taron Johnson pick 6. Go back to the 2019 win that Ravens had over Buffalo. They go 2 for 3 in the red zone. There's been a direct correlation between the team that wins. They're 2 and 2 over the last 4. The team that's better in the red zone wins these games. You need touchdowns, not field goals when you're on offense. You need field goals, not touchdowns when you're on defense. I think that's critical, and it's interesting that we both went there first. Number two is find ways to get the Ravens offense out of rhythm. I don't have that answer, man. You know, like you talk about getting quick pressure. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. Can Ed Oliver win quick? Can you have some A-gap blitzes that create some confusion and you have a breakthrough and you got a free runner at Lamar or Derrick Henry? However you can get them out of rhythm, it's probably some of that. It's probably an all of the above approach, right? It's not like, hey, do this every single play. I think it's do lots of things at the right times. And I think that's going to be important. What can you do to get them out of rhythm? Because if you don't, dude, you've watched the Ravens. We've all watched the Ravens. It's like, how do you deal with it? Yeah. So I think it's an all of the above approach, and whatever it is, get them out of rhythm. And then number three, another very similar talking point. I think for the Bills, it's about working matchups on offense. And I look at two in particular, Brandon Stevens. I think everybody knows, like, that's the player you go after for Baltimore. And so if you have chances with Cooper or Coleman or Hollins, take them. You know, I think not only is there a ball skills issue with Brandon Stevens, who's it's still kind of new to playing corner, if I'm not mistaken, at SMU. Yes. He's like a converted player. But, you know, a guy that doesn't necessarily – there's going to be size advantages that the Bills can have there as well. And I think there's that other linebacker spot as well, where it's Roquan and then it's like Malik Harrison, Chris Ford. Yep. Right, so they've kind of moved away. The Trenton Simpson thing is not working for now. How do you take some chances there? I mean, the Ravens have given up the fourth most receiving yards to running backs this year, the 9th most yards to tight end. So how do you get your guys in positions to take advantage of maybe some areas that Baltimore's had some vulnerability on defense? So it's winning red zone, find ways to get Baltimore out of rhythm offensively, and then what matchups can you attack that's going to keep your offense moving and scoring points?
And these are two very high-powered teams. And I think that when you talk about each particular matchup, there are ways that I feel like both teams match up well with each other, but I think it's going to be which team exploits the weaknesses better and say, we're just going to go to this over and over and over. Because, for example, the Ravens against the Steelers, one, didn't get up for the game. I expect Buffalo to be much more competitive than Pittsburgh was.
Sure.
Much more. But I think that the Ravens, there was a lot of conversation about, okay, you know, they barely ran in the AFC Championship game. You need to lean into your strength. They ran 50 times because it was working. They exploited that Steelers weakness and they never let it go the entire game. So I think that for me, if the Ravens or Bills do that and they, you know, don't get too cute, you stick to what you know, you stick to who you are, that could be the difference in a win or a loss.